It's decision day for the People's Democratic Party across the country as delegates choose who will best represent their interests as chief executives at the governorship primary elections ahead of 2023. In Abia State, the exercise ends with the former Vice-Chancellor of Abia State University, Professor Eliezer Ikone, emerging victorious. However, Minority Leader of the Senate, Senator Naya Abaribe, pulled out of the primaries, describing the process as a charade. The withdrawal race is also seen in Akwa Ibom governorship, where Bassi Albert and Luke Onofiok pull out of the race, and the Enugu PDP governorship primary, where Senator Ike Kweramadu also backs out. In Benue State, the Speaker of the Benue State House of Assembly, Right Honorable Titus Uba, wins the election with 731 votes. In the southwest, Segun Showumi is declared winner, polling 554 votes, but elsewhere at the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Library in Abeokuta, another parallel governorship primary is being held under the supervision of a five-man electoral committee led by Professor Akase Soka. Delegates from the 20 local government areas of the state are currently participating in the process, which is expected to produce a winner among other aspirants. While in Oyo State, Governor Seyi Makinde is nominated after polling the highest number with 1,040 votes. Makinde. The decision of the delegates is just one step, as the decider is up to a wider population of citizens who will give their verdict in 2023.
What a day it was for the People's Democratic Party yesterday. Don't forget the APC, of course, has its own governorship primaries today. But let's walk you through the outcome of the primaries across the various states yesterday. And we're starting off with Adamawa State. Well, the incumbent governor, Governor Umaru Fintiri, emerged a winner in that primary. He actually clinched 663 votes. And right here in Lagos, there was a PDP primary as well, governorship primary, with Olajide Adediran, 679 votes, emerging winner. Runner-up was David Kolaole Vaughan with 20 votes. And in Oyo State, not too far away, just next door, right? No. Well, Ogun will say they're next door. Next door to next door. Okay, the next door neighbor. There you go, Ogun State. You have well, Oyo State rather, before Ogun State. You have Governor Seyi Makinde with 1,040 votes. Runner-up Hazim Bolarimi with 2 votes. And now to Ogun State, where Segun Showumi, you may have seen that in that report, with 554 votes, with runners-up including Jimmy Lawal, Ladi Adebutu with 30 and 15 votes. Not forgetting what has been described as a parallel primary that was held as well. I thought we had moved on from parallel elections and all of that.
There will definitely be implications for the primary elections that we're seeing with disaffection in Ogun, in Enugu, in Abia State. You know, coming with a lot of consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have our resource person speak to it. From there, let's go to Benue, where we have Titus Uba emerging with 731 votes. His runner-up, Benson Abono, had 81 votes. That's a landslide.
Yeah, so the Speaker of the State Assembly actually emerged tops above the Deputy Governor of the state.
Of the state.
Whoa. Interesting one there.
Very, very interesting.
Interesting politics, too.
Oh, dear.
Then in Enugu, the winner, Peter Mba, polled 790 votes, while Senator Ike Ekweremadu, two-time Deputy Senate President, withdrew. From there, let's go to Yobe. Winner is Sheriff Abdullahi, who polled 295 votes. Runners-up, Abagana Tata had 109 votes, while Ali Tikau had recorded 129 votes, I beg your pardon. And from there, go to Taraba, where the winner is Kefas Agu, who polled 443 votes. Runners-up, Joseph Kuini, Jerome Nyame, Joel Ikenya, Hikaya Buba Joda polled 31 votes, 24, 11, and 6 votes in that order. Ayo.
Well, yeah, it's quite a list. You know, we have in Kwara is the next one we may want to quickly look at. Abdullah Yaman had 518 votes, and there are 2 runners-up actually. I don't know how these landslides happen. For the life of me.
This is the time you need to brush up your maths because lots of figures flying around and you have to just pay attention.
And then also you need to work on your BP. Aliyu Aman Patege scored 31 votes, and Professor Isa Ganda had 14 votes in Kwara. In Bauchi, 655 votes went to Ibrahim Kasim. And down southeast in Abia, you have Professor Eliezer Ikone. You know, of course, we all know the Senator Inaya Baribe withdrew from that race. And in Akwa Ibom, we have Umar Eno, who is like the governor's anointed candidate, so to speak. Well, I guess we'll see that play out. And then, you know, our paper's guest was talking about some people having 2 votes, 2 votes, 2 votes each. Onofiok Luke scored 2 votes, a member of the National Assembly. Well, there was no governorship primary in Abuja, but
No, we don't have a governor in Abuja, so we don't do primaries. Well, except for Senator and I think also House of Reps. They have 2 House of Reps candidates, or 4 of them or more, who should emerge. But you should have 2 representatives for the Federal Capital Territory and a senator. Well, there are more states which also did their primaries yesterday. Delta has a winner from the PDP, Sheriff Ovori, who won with 590 votes. Runners-up, David Edevier, who had 113 votes. Senator James Manager had 83 votes, and there were 11 others who also contested. In Rivers, there was a winner. Siminialayi Fubara won with 721 votes. The runners-up came close, or did they not come close? Isaac Kamalu came with 86 votes, and 14 others were also in the race. In Gombe, the winner is Mohammed Barde. He had 160 votes. The runner-up, Jamilu Guama, had 119 votes, pretty close. In Nasarawa, David Ombugadu won with 247 votes, and the runner-up, who is Major General Nuhu Angbazo, came pretty close with 202 votes. So I don't know if this figure tells us anything. We have a guest this morning who's going to be telling us a lot here, though. He is Jidelfo Adibe, who is a professor of political science and international relations at the Nasarawa State University in Kefi. Prof, you're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, at least in the state where you are working, there seem to be some close political primary there in the PDP. We know the APC will be going for theirs today.
Yeah.
We don't know what it's going to be like. We hope it's just as hit-free as what we've seen. Maybe it was not exactly hit-free when you look at the withdrawals that we saw. That is also very telling. But what do the figures, from what you can see, what do they tell us? Some of them really wide, maybe the opponent only getting 2 votes. Others pretty close, looking like I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do they tell you?
I think, for example, if you look where the governors are, it's like the case of Rivers, and the governor has a preferred candidate, an anointed candidate, you see the gap is very huge. You look at that Nasarawa state, for example, is an APC state, and that was PDP primary. So it becomes a contest among the kingmakers, because remember, it's about delegates. And some of these are the delegates that people sponsor them for the election. So they are already beholden to some interest. So it depends down on the balance of force among the kingmakers in the area. So where there's, if it's not a state controlled, say, by a party in power, if for example, is an APC state, then it becomes a contest among other notables within the PDP who has more of the control of the structures, and that will influence, the outcome. You see that in Nasarawa State, Labaran, withdrew. Like everywhere in the world, you do your own math. You start by talking about, this is my own path to victory. And the people talk about delegate hunt. So by the time you get very close, it becomes quite obvious whether your math will work or work against you. If you look at Enugu State, for example, Ekike Ekweremadu was not the preferred candidate of the governor. And it's understandable that, instead of humiliating himself, especially under the current electoral act, if you run in one party primary, you can't run in another. So it makes sense to withdraw. The same thing in Abaribe. Abaribe was not favored again by the party primaries. And the party in power, the government, also wasn't apparently endorsing his candidacy. So it makes also sense that he will withdraw or be humiliated.
Well, your indicators are quite interesting, and I think that is something that we should hold in one hand. The states where, that still have governors of that particular political party, we should watch how the results play out. But it will be interesting to know where there are other godfathers, apart from the governors. What exactly could we have expected from states like that? There are states who had, I don't want to say founding fathers, but whose past governors also have a pretty strong influence in that state. The calculations will be a bit interesting to see.
There is always in every state the powerful groups. You can call them the kingmakers. And it depends on the number of kingmakers in a particular area and who they endorse.
I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts for us, because we have another guest on Zoom, Dr. Sam Amadi, who is an associate professor of law and director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, joins us via Zoom. Good morning, Dr. Amadi.
Good morning, Mukia. Good morning.
I do not know what you... Fantastic. I do not know what you make of the results which we have seen so far from the PDP governorship primaries, or even the Senate or the House of Reps primaries which have been conducted so far. But what is your own reading of all that has transpired? Do you also hold it on one hand that in the states where the governors are of that political party, there would be, or we have seen, or the results that we have seen reflect an overbearing influence by those of them who are still in office?
Of course, I agree with my friend Prof, that what we are seeing is clearly a pattern in Nigerian politics. The governors have been in charge. Take, for example, the Enugu scenario, where a little-known Peter, who is probably a very rich and good guy, but of course unknown, is a choice of the governor and most of the major stakeholders. Now, Ekweremadu, a better-known, well-established politician, loses out. Now, the same Ekweremadu is a product of the same governor's control of the party. He was a creation of Amadi, who brought him almost from Boka, said nowhere, chief of staff, and made him a senator. And Ekweremadu was billed under Obasanjo to be the Senate president of Nigeria. He said that the senators themselves chose Ken Amadi. The party chose Ekweremadu. People didn't know that. So Ekweremadu was benefited from the fact that the governor, his governor Chimoro, was in charge. If you look at Enugu, the Enugu is a low-energy politics. Usually the governor determines the criteria of other influencers who are themselves influenced by the governor. Now, if you go to Abia, the same thing you see that of course, he didn't want Adibe, who happened to come from almost the same team, the zoning caught up with him. And so what we see in this primary is the same déjà vu, what we have seen before, that Nigerian democracy is predicated on two things: muscle, whether it's money, structure, and sometimes geopolitics. But essentially, the governor or the party owner, for example, Jigawa, where PDP is not in power, are clearly totally in charge and pushes some. Look at Wike in Rivers, where even the winner himself, he has been declared wanted, not even in sight. So primarily, what you see playing out here is that Nigerian politics is patron-client relationship. When the governor is in power, he becomes a patron. And everybody else becomes client. And when there's no governor, you see 2 or 3 patrons who control one side of the political divide, and then they determine the outcome. So you look at it one way, those delegates, those party members who elect delegates, free and fair. I watched some of the proceedings. Those are free and fair from a formalistic democracy theory point of view. Free and fair. People went and voted. But behind free and fair is that there's little agency. People are not making choices based on any defined criteria. Choices that they have to vote who the governor or who the political strongman that they should vote for. Or they have to vote the persons they have been paid to vote for. So that's where we are. And so that's no surprise. This is how it has been in 2007, 2011, 2015 to 2019, and just now. Basically, the Nigerian voter, whether as party members or as the populace, are basically captured voters, pledged voters who vote based on the criteria set up by the strongman. In many cases, the governor. Some cases, the political patron.
So what about the places? I mean, have we seen any examples whereby yes, there's a sitting governor, but they have emerged from a political family, from one, for instance, Delta State. We saw the forces at play there. What precisely, I mean, we know who eventually won. We understand that he's someone who's currently in government, I think serving as a secretary to the government of the state. But what do you make of that political family in Delta State and how matters have now played out?
Beside the fact that we have hegemons, there are also conflict within the structure, what we call the structured thesis and the conflict thesis. The structured thesis is that there's a structure. Everything happens with the structure. But the conflict thesis says within the structure there's a conflict. So we see in Delta, for example, a split between Ibori, the godfather, as it were, of the having governor, and the governor who has also built up his own muscle to play under Ibori over Delta. And so what we saw, for example, for the runoff, that Ibori's daughter barely scraped through in the runoff. We saw Uduaga's daughter lose out, saw the governor's daughter win, and we saw that the governor was able to get his candidate. We had Nduti Elubelu strong his own town, but basically idolizing the governor says Ekweme one has delivered. So the data is the governor himself who is winning big, even though he's supposed to be a protege of Ibori, who has this, he has not displayed. So we will see that replicated in many places where political families keep control, and then you see suddenly in other places where political families are now dislodged by a political son who somehow carves his own kingdom or somehow breaks it. So that's the conflict that Nigerian politics is so orchestrated. There's a hegemon in structural politics, there's a structural problem where the structure keeps the game. Then there's a conflict within that structure that opens opportunity, and that's what we saw also in Anambra where people emerged. It was a crisis of a family, a structure crisis, and he leveraged on it and came. So we see that through this primary, that where the structure is intact, it produces outcome. Where the structure has crisis, either because the new control of that, the person from the family fails to keep that trust or breaks up that family and it creates a different family, will now see opportunities for irredentists, for all kinds of politicians, and opportunities to probably leverage and emerge. That's what we're seeing through this crisis.
Well, let me ask Prof this question, and both of you have spoken about the strength, the influence of the governors in all of these, and of course we know that that is the story. Some have just been hoping, when will things change? So far it seems that we're not even looking on the side of how the delegates performed, rather we're talking about the influence of the governors. Prof, do you see that as a problem, or it's just the same of the same? How is this going to affect anything if it's the influence of the governors we are seeing, and in which most people often say that after some time these favored, anointed candidates seem to turn on their, should I say, their masters now? We're not talking about the role the delegates played in all of these.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, you have to understand that the delegates themselves are a product of the Nigerian environment. It will be very unrealistic for you to expect them to be something drastically different from what you have at the environment itself. In other words, the delegates themselves are sometimes beholden to some interest. And many of the delegates, even from the time of the Just Convention in 1993, it's a time for them to, monetize. For many of them are looking forward to becoming delegates. And then it's a time to get a slice of their own share of the national cake, which they believe those throwing the money around that, okay, well, they can justify it. Well, by the way, how did they make this money? So, yes, some delegates we have seen in recent times where delegates collected money and still voted the other way. And we read the story of someone, a candidate, was it in Delta, who collapsed because after sharing 2 million apiece to the delegates, he still got only 3 votes. So the delegates are supposed to play the role in their role is just to select. In theory, they are supposed, because it's more like indirect, they are supposed to represent certain constituencies and vote based on their own perception of the competence of the candidates. That's all we are told in theory. But then this is mediated by other circumstances. That's mediated by certain preferences of the delegates themselves. So these days, it's not just enough for you to have money. We have seen people who distribute money. The former vice president's son, we were told, after sharing money and the outcome did not favor him, the people did not deliver as promised, he asked them to refund the money. We don't know if that will be refunded, but what I'm trying to say, the point now is that, yes, delegates are supposed to go there, represent various constituencies, and choose on behalf of the constituents the people they think will best represent the interest of the country. In reality, to put it succinctly, in reality, yes, in reality, it's often they play to the wishes of other interests. Some of them, some may still take the money and vote according to their conscience. Before coming to this program, I was reading my friend Shegun Adeni's column today, where he was referring to the late Adibe, who told Abiola during the Just Convention, yeah, we're not going to take money from you because you are one of us. And he said that after the election, he went to Abiola and said, you see, I delivered. Now where is the delegates' money? So these things play out. The money will always be there, just like ethnicity will always be a factor in Nigerian politics, but it's not often on its own. It is not the only factor that will determine the outcome. It interacts with other variables.
Well, let me ask, Dr. Amadi, this next one. Is it to say that the delegates do not understand the burden on their shoulders, or it's just the same of the same? Because if the trend has been as it was in the beginning, so it is now and ever shall be, it probably sounds like it's going to be governance as we've had it before. So is there any hope in sight that going forward on any of the political platforms, whichever one it is, that there will be some understanding of the enormous responsibilities that delegates have, not just for the governorship primaries that we're talking about, but even for the other ones, the legislative assemblies, both in the National Assembly and the states?
Sure, there's hope. There's real hope. But you see, the Electoral Act has also helped to shape the landscape of election and to provide incentive for this kind of behavioral change. So, for example, now, we do know that INEC is more on the ground, monitoring behavior of parties. The Electoral Act now provides constraints around what principals or patrons can do. But again, look, the dynamics that will drive change will be twofold. One, we will see better socioeconomic environment, the poverty level and its utilization. If you look at many of the people who are pushing P2B's presidency, their profile suggests people who are economically dependent, people who are released from the trial, if you like, of ethnicity, religion, and poverty. So the shift, the growth of the economy, the more we get like a middle class that's actually politically empowered and economically empowered, we have that shift. Again, the driver will also be competitiveness in the political landscape. If the smaller parties begin to mount a challenge and the electoral system begin to show us that it's not, it's not open and closed, that you can actually vote and the vote count, that small parties that are not mainstream can win, then what happens is that the electors and the owners of the parties, the major parties, begin now to know that it doesn't pay to win the primary and lose the election if you present a candidate that's not good enough, or who has the muscle, who has the resources to buy the delegates. So we will now see incentives shift away from buying delegates to endorsing candidates who have better chance of winning at the poll. So we're going to solve this problem on the supply side, not demand side, meaning we're going to create the possibility of competition, a market for votes that's transparent and competitive. So people now know that, look, the electors out there believe in their vote. And therefore, if we don't present a candidate that's legitimate, that is popular, that people want, then we're going to be punished. Now, what will come out of it is that in elections like this, in the primaries, you see people who will win because the constituencies they belong to need them. Either they are demagogues, either they are populists, either they are technocrats, either they are ethnicists, people who the people themselves want to send to Abuja or to the government. And so that dynamics will shape how the party owners will now open themselves to competition. Let me say this, if Peter Obi, for example, takes a third party ticket, and even if it doesn't win, and push the two parties to some significant competitive election, it will be a watershed. You see, in the next election, the two parties will know that a third party can actually win a presidential election if it answers to the demands of the people. And so that has an impact in shaping how these patrons...
Just 1 second, Dr. Amadi. Talking about the demands of the people, a number of things that, some would have expected is that maybe the manifestos of the parties, the programs of the parties would have played up. Now, some have expected that perhaps even at the delegates levels, there should be political debates. Maybe that would have helped to at least excite the mind of the delegates themselves and say, okay, this guy has it, this guy has it. Otherwise, how is the hope you're talking about going to play out?
Very good point. And if you look at the design, that's why I also blame INEC. INEC packed long time for campaign and less time for the primaries, for maybe other strategic reasons. But if you look at the time for primary, yesterday on your protocol to today, your data expert showed some of the candidates, and he highlighted Tambuwal, he highlighted Shibanjo, and I think Yaya Bello. Some of the guys, the candidates who are packed with great programs. But the question is, does the period allow for this interrogation and engagement? So I think it was probably a mistake to have seen the primaries as a routine process and given only 2 months window. Because what does that make forced upon the party contestant is actually to leave out the rhetoric of politics and focus on the markets, go and buy, call the strong guy in Kano, call the strong guy. And that's what we are seeing, that the election is shaping. And those who are likely to be candidates are those who have the delegates. And as we count in PDP, for example, why Peter's left out was because there's no pathway to that victory. Because the delegates are people like Tambuwas, Wike, maybe Atiku self suffering some loss of delegates because of the fact that the electoral process has focused attention on market, on buying and selling of delegates, on getting those contacts and talking to them, rather than going around the states and really taking time to unfold your own manifesto and program. So I think if we design it better and recognize that primaries are actually the most important part of this election, because we don't know independent candidates, and that means that the choice the people face are choice already framed by the political party. And therefore, through the delegates who are party members, we can now go through that process of look at the candidates in a better way and then helping electors down the line. So the design will improve, and of course, you create incentive for candidates to now really engage the people and discuss how they will deal with the issues they face. So I think we're going to get incentives right. The structuring of the business right.
Well, Dr. Amadi, we need to go for a quick break now. And yes, our viewers may have seen Honorable Yusuf. We'll come to that. I mean, the conversation gets even bigger. But just to bring you this just in, apparently the results of the PDP primaries are still coming in. And from Kaduna State, we have this one. Mohammed Issa Ashiru has emerged the winner of the Kaduna PDP governorship primary with 414 votes. We have runners-up including Sunny City with 260 votes, Ramalan Yero, former governor, with 28 votes, and Senator Shehu Sani with 2 votes. It seemed like he saw that coming because he had been speaking about how he's not going to even go the route, the usual route. From Jigawa as well, the winner, Mustafa Sule Lamido, we talked about it with 829 votes. And in fact, Zamfara just came in as well. Winner is Dawda Lawal with 431 votes. 3 other aspirants pulled out. So, I mean, the results keep coming in. But we'll go to break now, and we'll come back to continue this conversation. Please stay with us. Dr. Sam Amadi and Professor Jideo Adibe still with us on the program this morning. We've been taking a look at the governorship primaries in the PDP, in fact, other primaries, as well as the coming primaries in the APC. And also that, well, is it a shocker for some people, the pullout of, well, Mr. Peter Obi from the PDP's presidential race. So a couple of issues to still touch on. I'll just yield to my colleague Bukola for the next one. Bukola.
Yeah, Professor Amadi, Aya was talking about the responsibility, the burden on the shoulders of the delegates, whether they are fully aware of it, and perhaps whether conferences should begin to be held, amongst them, to help them understand fully the implications of their responsibility to elect candidates. But then again, we started off by talking about the overbearing or seemingly overbearing influence of the governors in determining the delegates and how it has panned out in the elections. Are the governors themselves aware of the implications of this? And how do we move in the direction where the governors will be themselves the ones to begin to champion an intellectual debate amongst delegates so that the evolution of democracy will begin to be in another direction, move in another direction? Professor Amadi?
Okay, so thank you. Well, I think good point. The civil society, INEC, they have a role to play. And that's why I think INEC is doing political education. In the West report, there was some discussion around unbundling INEC so that there would be a political education arm. There's also the idea of getting back to the days of CDS, or Momori, where we had good political focus under Babangida about educating the citizens around political leadership and their role as the electors. I think I agree with you that, look, we need to do more about political education. But again, 3 things are important for agents, what I call agents. Agency is the notion that human beings, citizens know that they're the ones who make the decision, the difference. We say your vote is your power, use it well. So first, you look at the economics. There's economic aspect of agency. People are so poor, and the leaders have weaponized poverty. It will be difficult for you to get people to understand really that this moment of election is a moment where they exercise their power and not to use that moment to maybe satisfy economic needs. So that's important. The second one is social. Our society is concerned around helplessness. People feel helpless everywhere. So even if you look at some people, they say, does it matter? Does it count? They don't even expect the leaders will ever translate leadership to economic or social goods for them. And therefore, this is a cash out for them. It makes more sense to get paid off at upfront rather than expect money at the end of the day. And the final one, I think that's what I'm talking about, is how do we begin to reshape their consciousness? If we take care of the economics, which is a difficult problem all over the world, take care of the social, which means we resurrect a society that's accountable, a society where the voice counts, where rule of law operates, where there's no impunity. People now recover and say that, look, there's something called citizenship. There's a failure of citizenship in Nigeria in all dimensions. And it shows in the election. You look at the percentage of people who actually vote in this country, compared with the crisis of governance, you'll be ashamed that, look, so we don't even care to vote and care enough to vote. in the Southeast, where there's greater degree of despondence and distrust of government. So I think that the answer is basically you have to recognize this problem. INEC has to step in. INEC is doing what they should do more. I'm in support of INEC becoming a very strong regulator, going out there to constrain the politicians and to sow back hope. The Electoral Act has actually given more people greater control. The NSAS team are ready to go into the field because they see that the Electoral Act protects more of democracy rather than protect politicians and the political parties. So if you have more of that refinement, more of INEC's role, civil society focusing now not just on monitoring election, which we do all the time, which has become a cottage industry, but now about recreating citizenship, helping citizens recover the fact that, look, in spite of this crisis, it's actually their vote that will change things. We begin to see that shift. It will take some time, but it will happen. But I tell you what, if Nigerians see an upset in 2023, and if Nigerians see a leader who comes, unusual kind of leader who resets the institution, you'll be surprised how much people will recover their power to change things. And you will now see delegates really no longer thinking more about who has the money to give them, but more concerned about who has the message that appeal to us. So it will take some time, but it requires some headwinds. And I think a competitive election, a major upset, and the rise of a leader who can inspire back hope and do things unusual will be a major catalyst for this change that we desire.
Indeed, you're right about how all segments of society should collectively own the process. But let's explore the politics a bit more. And earlier on, you observed when Mark was talking about the political family in Delta State, you referred to the emergence of the daughter of the political godfather in that state winning a ticket of the House of Representatives, whereas the governor had his way where the governorship ticket was concerned. Ahead of this time, the concern was that the governors were lamenting a loss of control of the delegate system, but there hasn't been any upset where the governorship tickets are concerned. It's either the governors were returned or their candidates, they had their way in the choice of their successors. Are we going to be seeing in that light now a surprise in the emergence of candidates winning the senatorial seats and the House of Representatives seats? Are we still going to be seeing the influence of the governors here in the coming days?
Yes, I think so. For one reason, you see, the Electoral Act did something. The legislators wanted to play politics and they played against themselves. So what has happened, like, look, we have taken off all the statutory delegates. So what that means that certain former governors, former speakers, former this and that, who have the independence to challenge the governors and vote on point, are now removed from that list. So what you have now is the 3-man delegates in most of the elections, where the governors had control, basically because they had the structure in the local government to deliver that. So most of the governors control those delegates right now. Unfortunately, and that's the right thing to do really, because all delegates should be local, which is local. So because the governors are in charge, if you look at the states, there is no internal democracy in the states. The House of Assemblies are basically, most of them are rubber stamp. We focus so much on Abuja, where there is even some significant independence and separation of power. But in the states, you don't have that. So what happened by abandoning the states, by allowing the states to be where they are, the governors have created a strong, authority, power, hegemon over those states. And so what will happen, even the presidency, is that except because the presidency is going to be on national delegates, and some non-governors, they have succeeded in getting their national delegates on their side, you will see the same pattern that those candidates who have better support of their colleagues, whereas they have state governors, and those who control their territory. For example, look at the delegate list for the presidency PDP. The Northwest has a lot of those votes. The Southeast small, and the rest of the places relatively small. What I mean is that everybody who controls the Northwest states where there's no PDP government. And in this case, it looks like it to be either a Tambuwal or maybe I can get some article. It means that that person has an advantage because
Dr. Amadi, if I may butt in, just sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Amadi. I'm sorry to interrupt your thoughts there, but let me bring it to Professor Adibe here. I'd like to ask you, I mean, do you see anything? Do you see any way out of this? I think I already asked that question earlier, but I'd like to pose it to you if you see any way out of this governor's chokehold on delegate control at political primaries.
Yeah, I think also what we overlook is that there's been a tension. It's either the party dominates or the governors. If you look at that, the whole essence of that section 24.8, about whittling that, which says that, for example, that all electors, all the delegates must be democratically elected. That was to whittle the influence of the party. You know, where if you talk about statutory delegates, then they will have better way of controlling. So now that you removed the influence of statutory delegates, you have to look at the process through which the delegates themselves emerge. It says democratically elected, so you go to the ward, you get 3, you go to the local government, you get 1, a national. And who controls the state automatically will come to the governors. So you have more leverage for that, where you don't have a governor where the party is not in power in that state. So all the idea of voter education and all this, they help. But it's just like saying that ICPC and the EFCC should go and teach about corruption in secondary schools and all that, and that will solve the problem of corruption. It's not about they are not knowing. They do know, but you know, it is about economic rationality, as some people would say. So but the reason why it is very difficult to dislodge the governors is that because people do not commit class suicide. It is their own vested interest. They control that structure. And unless we find an alternative way of diluting that, just like the Electoral Act tried to dilute that of the statutory delegates by saying you must be democratically elected. And then that meant immediately that the weight shifted now automatically to the governors who control the state and whatever goes down through the local government and subsystems. So unless we're able to find a way, and I think INEC has been thinking, and you know, the National Assembly people thought that the real amendment, that if we quickly put in that it will also include people that are not elected, it will solve the problem. It won't. So I think that it is part of our process of political evolution, and it's going to take a little bit while before we get it right.
I just keep wondering, though, how come governors never learn? Every time they try to, you know, elect their or get their successors in office, and it just never works out. Very rarely do we see any example working out to the end of that governor's tenure.
I agree with you, but also you have to look at it, what will be their alternative. If they decide not at all to support the process, to support, you know, to try to have an eye on who will support them, it means that even whatever legacy they think they are leaving behind, it may start by dismantling it immediately, just like we see the APC at the federal level doing almost immediately they came in terms of demarketing the previous administration. So you do your own calculation, even if it is 1 year that you get this grace period before the attack comes. So I think that's also what some of the things they are counting on. But is it a good investment? They must have calculated that after knowing the history, that rarely does it work, and they still keep doing it. It means there's something they are seeing in it.
Maybe we'll ask them in future, but today we have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Professor Jidofo Adibe is a professor of political science and international relations at the Nasarawa State University in Kefi. And Dr. Sam Amadi, who joined us via Zoom, is an associate professor of law, director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Dr. Amadi, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily. Let's take a break at this point. As Kayode did say, it does get deeper. You already have a peek into who we're bringing on next. Do stay with us.